The town that never shows up on maps. It started like any other road trip. I was in my car, driving through the back roads, heading to a friend's cabin for the weekend. I took the route that I knew would avoid the major highways, hoping for a peaceful drive with no traffic. I'd heard rumors about a small town up in the mountains, one that wasn't listed on any maps. People talked about it in hushed voices, but it always felt like one of those ghost stories you hear just to scare the newcomers. A town with no name, a town that didn't exist. Naturally, it intrigued me. I decided to see if I could find it. The drive was uneventful for the first few hours. The road twisted and turned, the scenery growing more isolated as I got deeper into the mountains. The sunlight faded, and the air became colder, as though the temperature dropped a few degrees for no reason. The radio started to fade in and out, playing static more than music, but I wasn't too concerned. I'd been on long drives before, and it was always like this once you left the city behind. Then I saw the sign. It wasn't a proper road sign, just a small rusted piece of metal barely hanging onto the post. It read, "Welcome to Terran's Hollow." I'd never heard of it, not once, not in any travel guides or from anyone I'd ever spoken to about this area. I pulled over to the side of the road, staring at the sign. My curiosity piqued. I took a few photos, but when I looked up again, I realized the town wasn't visible. There were no buildings, no houses in sight. The only thing visible was a dark, narrow road cutting deeper into the trees. I thought maybe it was a mistake, just a random detour. But I decided to take the road anyway, half out of curiosity and half because I wasn't in a hurry. I made a sharp turn and drove deeper into the woods. The road stretched on longer than I expected. The trees grew thicker and the air became dense, almost oppressive, the kind of heavy silence you only feel when you're truly alone. The sun was gone now, replaced by thick clouds, and the fog had rolled in from the valley below. My headlights illuminated nothing but swirling gray, and I felt my pulse quicken. Then I saw it. The town was up ahead, just a few hundred yards down the road, as if it had appeared out of nowhere. The buildings were old, run down, and looked abandoned, but there was a flicker of light in the distance. A warm yellow glow spilling from behind drawn curtains. The kind of light you only see when people are still awake, still living in a place. I pulled into the main street, my tires crunching on the gravel. The town was completely still, but I could see people moving behind the windows. At least, I thought I saw them. Shapes passing by in the shadows. I parked my car near the town square and walked towards what looked like a small diner. The bell above the door jingled when I entered. The interior was exactly what I imagined, a quiet, forgotten place, like something out of the past. There was a dusty counter and a few tables scattered around. At one of the tables, an older woman sat, staring blankly at her cup of coffee. Her hands were folded in front of her, but she didn't seem to notice me as I walked past. I sat at the counter, and a man in his mid-40s came over to take my order. His face was pale, almost sickly, but his eyes were piercing, watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "What can I get you?" he asked in a low, almost rasping voice. "Just coffee, I guess," I said, not sure why my own voice felt so tight in my throat. "What's this town called again? Terran's Hollow?" He looked at me strangely, his eyes narrowing for just a second. "You're in the Hollow. All right." I could feel a chill running up my spine. Something about the way he said it sent a jolt of unease through me. I nodded, unsure of what else to say. The man poured the coffee and left me alone at the counter. As I sipped the hot drink, I tried to ignore the growing feeling that I wasn't supposed to be here, that something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that the town had been waiting for me, but just then, the door opened again. A few more people walked in. They looked like they were from different eras. Some of them wore old-fashioned clothes from decades ago, while others seemed like they just stepped out of the present. But none of them spoke. They just sat down, staring ahead, their eyes distant. I finished my coffee quickly and paid the man. He didn't say a word when I left, just nodded as if he'd been expecting me to go. I walked back to my car and drove away as fast as I could, but as I turned back onto the main road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Terran's Hollow was gone. No sign, no lights, no town. I thought I was losing my mind. I even checked my GPS, nothing. The road I had been on wasn't even marked. I tried to call my friend to let him know I was running late, but there was no signal. I stopped for gas about an hour later, and the gas station attendant gave me a strange look when I mentioned the town. "You don't want to go there," he said with a quiet voice. "Trust me, don't go back." But it was too late. I knew I'd be back. I had to see it again. I had to find out what happened to Terrence Hollow, because I knew, deep down, that it was never really gone. First story in the set. My friend's voice was still coming from the woods hours after he died. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. Just me, Chris, and Jake, the usual crew. We'd gone up to the mountains every year for as long as I could remember. The same spot, a secluded area near a creek, far from the trails. We'd hike, fish, drink, and camp out under the stars. No phone signal, no interruptions. A weekend to forget everything and just enjoy being out there. This year, though, something was different. The first 2 days were perfect. Clear skies, the sound of the creek flowing, the fire crackling at night. It was like any other trip. But on the third night, things started to feel off. We'd been sitting around the fire, talking about old times, reminiscing, when Jake, who had been silent for most of the evening, suddenly stood up. I remember his eyes were wide, like he'd just seen something, and he didn't say anything at first, just stood there, staring into the dark trees at the edge of the campsite. "Jake, what's up?" Chris asked. Jake didn't answer. Instead, he started walking towards the trees, slow, deliberate steps like something was pulling him. I stood up to call out to him, but Chris grabbed my arm. "Let him go," Chris whispered. "He'll be fine. He's just had too much to drink." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That something about the way Jake moved, the blankness in his eyes. It wasn't just the alcohol. It was like he wasn't there at all. "Jake!" I called out, but he didn't turn around. He just kept walking, farther into the woods. We waited for an hour. We thought maybe he'd gone off to be alone, to clear his head. But as the minutes passed, that knot in my stomach kept tightening. Something was wrong. I grabbed a flashlight, and we both started looking for him. We called out his name, our voices breaking the silence of the trees. We searched for hours, shouting, walking in circles, but there was no sign of Jake. No trace of him. Nothing. Just the stillness of the night. By the time the first light of dawn started breaking through the trees, we knew something had happened. I don't know how, but I knew in my gut that Jake was gone. That's when we heard it. At first, it was faint, like a whisper through the trees. "Help, help me." It sounded like Jake's voice, but not quite. I turned to Chris, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" Chris nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, it's him." But it didn't sound like Jake, not really. It was wrong. It was hollow, distant, like the voice was being carried on the wind from somewhere deep in the woods. "Jake?" I called, my voice shaking. "Jake, where are you?" And then right after I said his name, I heard it again, this time clearer, louder. "Help, help me, I'm right here." The voice was coming from the direction we just searched, from deeper in the forest. We ran. We didn't think, we just ran. The sun was up now, but it didn't help. The forest was still thick with shadows. We stumbled over roots and rocks, shouting Jake's name, but the voice kept coming. Every time we thought we were getting closer, it moved farther away, drawing us deeper. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found him. Jake was lying at the base of a tree, his body twisted at an impossible angle. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the sky. Blood was pooled around him. He'd been dead for hours, but his voice was still coming from the woods. That same hollow, wrong voice. It was getting louder. I remember standing there, paralyzed, as we stared at Jake's body. I don't know what happened next, but I remember hearing him again. The voice wasn't calling out to us anymore. It was calling to me. "I'm still here." And then it stopped. Everything went silent. Chris tried to call for help, but when we got back to camp, there was nothing but a heavy silence. No one was coming. We left the mountain, but we never spoke about it again. And every year, like clockwork, I still hear it. That voice, in the back of my head. It's not always clear, but it's there. Sometimes when I'm alone in the woods, I think I hear it calling my name. And I wonder, sometimes, if I really left that place, or if I'm still there. The long wait for a train that never came. I never meant to end up in that station. It was an old, forgotten place, tucked away far from the main tracks. I was just passing through, on my way to visit a friend in a nearby town, when I saw the sign for a connecting train. The schedule said it was only a few minutes until the next train would arrive, but something about the station felt wrong from the moment I stepped off the bus. The station was abandoned, or so it seemed. The air had a stale, musty quality, as though no one had bothered to maintain the place for decades. The waiting room was empty, with faded benches lining the walls, and the floors were cracked and uneven. A single flickering light hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the room. I walked up to the ticket booth, but the window was closed. There was no one behind it, no sign of life at all. The silence was deafening. I looked around, trying to find some sign of where the train might be, but all I could see were the dimly lit tracks stretching off into the distance. The sign above the platform read, "Next train, 7:12 p.m." I checked my watch. It was 7:05. I sat down on one of the benches, feeling an odd sense of unease settle over me. I'd been on countless train rides before, and yet this place felt different. The stillness, the strange, distant hum of machinery that I couldn't place. There was something about the atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I waited, watching the clock on the wall slowly tick away the minutes. 7:10, 7:11, and then nothing. The clock stopped. The silence deepened, uneasy. Where was the train? I peered out the window, but I couldn't see anything in the distance. No headlights, no faint rumbling of an approaching train. Just empty tracks stretching out into the darkness. I checked my watch again. It still read 7:12, but no train had arrived. At this point, I was starting to get nervous. Something wasn't right. I walked over to the ticket booth once more, knocking on the glass. "Hello," I called. "Is anyone here?" No answer. The station felt like it had been frozen in time. The world outside might be moving, but here, in this place, everything was still. I turned back to the platform, hoping to see a train coming in. But instead, I saw something else, something far worse. In the distance, far down the tracks, a figure appeared. A man, standing perfectly still. His silhouette was faint, like a shadow against the darkness, and for a moment I couldn't make out his features. He was just there, watching. I squinted, trying to see him more clearly. Was he waiting for the train too? I had to know. I stepped out onto the platform, drawn to him. The air felt colder now, the wind picking up and carrying with it the distant hum I'd noticed earlier. It sounded like machinery, like something mechanical was coming to life. But I still couldn't see the train. As I walked closer, the figure remained motionless. He was tall, with a long coat that seemed to sway unnaturally with the wind, and his face was shadowed, obscured by the brim of his hat. The closer I got, the more I felt something was off. It wasn't just that he didn't move, it was the way he seemed too still, as if he was waiting for something to happen. I stopped just a few feet away, but the figure didn't acknowledge me. He didn't speak. He didn't move. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stared at him. There was something deeply unsettling about his stillness, something that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, I heard a loud clanking sound behind me. I spun around, expecting to see the train approaching, but there was nothing, just the empty platform and the distant glow of the station lights. When I turned back, the man was gone. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Where had he gone? How could he have disappeared so quickly? I looked around frantically, but there was no sign of him. The tracks were empty again, just like they had been before. I stepped back onto the platform, now feeling utterly alone. I glanced at my watch once more. It was 7:15 now, 15 minutes past the supposed arrival time of the train. No sign of it, no sign of anyone. I stood there, staring down the tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The strange hum was louder now, almost deafening, and I realized something terrifying. The station wasn't abandoned. It was stuck. The train was never coming. The time was never moving forward. The man on the tracks was never meant to be there. He was just part of the illusion, part of the loop. I had become part of it too, and now I couldn't leave. The sound of the train started again, faint at first, then growing louder. I turned toward it, my breath caught in my throat, but I knew deep down that I'd never board that train. Not this one, not anyone, because there was no escape. The tracks went on forever and the station would never let me go. It was only a matter of time before the next person would wander in, and then they'd wait, just like I had. The faces in the window that never blinked. It was late in the evening when I first saw them. I was sitting in my small apartment, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed a figure standing outside my window. The street was quiet, as it often was at night, with only a few scattered streetlights illuminating the sidewalk. At first, I thought it was just someone walking past, but when I glanced up again, I saw it. A face pressed against the glass. The figure was so close that I could see every detail of their features: dark, hollow eyes, a mouth twisted into a silent scream, and a face that seemed somehow wrong. I felt my blood run cold as I stared at it, unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me. But as I blinked, the face didn't move. I quickly got up and went to the window, heart racing. There was no one there, just the empty street, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlights. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, something to explain the strange illusion. But that night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I saw them again. Another face, just like the first. This time, there were two of them, one on either side of the window, their eyes wide and unblinking. I felt my heart beat faster as I watched, frozen under the weight of their gaze. I rushed to the window once more, but the faces were gone. The street was empty, just like before. But I knew deep down that something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or maybe I was just seeing things. But each night after that, the faces appeared. At first, just one, then two, and then three. Always standing still, watching me with their unblinking eyes, their mouths frozen in eerie expressions of horror. I started keeping the blinds closed at night, but even then I could feel them watching me. I felt the oppressive presence of those faces, like they were just waiting for me to open the window to invite them in. I told myself it was all in my head. The isolation, the long hours of work, the stress of living alone. Maybe it was causing me to see things, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. Then, one night, I decided to confront it. I opened the window slowly, cautiously, and looked out. The street was dark, the only sound the hum of the distant streetlights. And there they were, dozens of faces, all pressed against the glass of my window. Their eyes were wide open, their mouths twisted in silent screams. They were silent, unblinking, and still. And then, something shifted. One of the faces blinked. I stepped back in shock, my heart hammering in my chest. I slammed the window shut, but the faces were still there, their eyes still wide, their mouths still frozen in screams. I felt a coldness in the air, a creeping chill that I couldn't explain. I backed away from the window, my pulse racing, and then I heard it. A voice, soft and distant, as though it were coming from the other side of the glass. "Let us in." I screamed and backed away, but the faces didn't move. They didn't even flinch. They just watched, waiting. And that was when I realized that whatever they were, whatever had been standing outside my window, they weren't human. I spent the rest of the night pacing, my eyes glued to the window, watching as the faces pressed closer and closer. The longer I stared at them, the more I began to see details I hadn't noticed before. Their skin was mottled and gray, their eyes too large, their teeth sharp and uneven. They weren't just faces anymore, they were something else, something ancient and hungry. The next day, I packed up my things and left. I moved to a new apartment far away from that place, but I couldn't escape the memory of those faces. The image of their unblinking eyes, their twisted mouths, haunted me. I don't know what they were, I don't know why they appeared to me, but I do know one thing. They're still out there, waiting, watching, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forget the way they stared at me, their eyes unblinking, forever locked in a silent scream.